going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of The Kingdom Says. I am your host, as always, Garrett Williams, and today I have only got one of my usual co-hosts with me. Arrowhead Tom is here. Tom, how are we doing today, sir?
Oh, I am doing phenomenal. I really enjoyed your plan to not tell Kyle about us recording tonight, just so we can talk all about the draft. I really appreciate uh, the scheming behind the
Big
scenes. No,
schemers. Yeah.
yeah, no. Though Kyle is currently occupied, so we are holding it down tonight. But we are going to talk about the draft and some things that the Chiefs need to work on as we all wait for some type of news. But I'll let you get us into that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Not much news going on in the world of the Chiefs. Only a few signings since the last time that we talked to you guys. Not well, they're pretty significant, I suppose. We got two, three, four main ones, I guess. We re-signed Nick Allegretti and Derek Nottie, two key pieces from the past couple years. Backup caliber, really. I mean, Nick Allegretti especially, but Derek Nottie, kind of a he's been at that nose tackle position for the past couple years. Hasn't really made great strides, but a solid rotational defensive line piece that's obviously familiar with the system. So not a bad pickup, but and then Mike Edwards and Drew Tranquil have both been signed as well. Quick thoughts on either of those signings from you, Tom?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's good to bring back some of those pieces that we've had before. Allegretti and Nadia are both guys that have experience in the system, have experience playing with uh, the Chiefs. I know Nadi's snap count has kind of decreased the last couple of years, and especially with Colin Saunders, who did get paid by the Saints. We talked about that last episode. Kind of took over that role this last year, so it doesn't hurt to have some safety, like some security there. You can always improve, but I think if Nadi is your baseline, like you've seen some success there. Allegretti is a big deal for that offensive line because he really does kind of back up both those guard spots, and then I think in a pinch you could put him at center.
Yep.
As far as the new signings, I'm actually a big fan of both of them. Drew Tranquil was a little
Me too.
surprising that he was available for so cheap. Um,
Yeah,
he had
the
some
steal.
pretty impressive stats. How he fits in will be interesting, but he is in terms of, and they value their linebacker play, but yeah, just in coverage and it's like he really is a do it all Swiss Army knife kind of guy, and so probably means Leo Chenal is going to be riding the bench for a little bit longer, but they like to mix those guys in, so I think that's a big pickup. And then same thing with Mike Edwards. I think he's a um, you know a nickel starting level player, so he's that third safety kind of guy. I've talked before about kind of the need to replace Juan Thornhill and that sideline to sideline range, and that's really kind of what Mike Edwards has some of that ball hawk skills, and um, I think he'll be a guy that they rotate in and play in certain circumstances, in really pass heavy situations. So good pickups again. Not to say that those positions are going to be ignored in the draft or ignored, for the rest of free agency or anything like that. But you have some good insurance if you don't find another better option along the
Yeah.
way. I think you have a good start there.
Yeah, those definitely kind of fill some key holes back there. And obviously, we like to run three safeties a lot, so having Mike Edwards with the continued development of Brian Cook is going to be huge. And then yeah, Drew Tranquil, a guy we've seen a lot in his time in the league because he was with the Chargers for the past couple years, and yeah, really dynamic, kind of like a dime linebacker type guy. Another guy you can rotate in and have good pass coverage from. Probably not going to see Darius Harris re-signed with the Chiefs, and it'll kind of just be the Willie and Drew Tranquil show as far as your coverage linebackers go. So definitely, like you said, gives the Chiefs a lot of room to kind of go forward in far as some of the less critical positions like the like safety and linebacker and stuff like that. Because there's still some pretty big holes to be filled, at least at this point of the offseason. Um, Obviously, I think defensive line is still there's a lot of needs to address on the defensive line. We signed Charles Omenihu, but other than that, we have Frank Clark who is departed. Mike Dana is still there. We got uh, you know George Karlaftis and a couple other younger guys that you can rotate in and out. But you definitely want some more pieces on that defensive line. And then really the biggest one that's kind of that all of Chiefs Kingdom has been waiting for these past few weeks has been wide receiver. Something to happen on the wide receiver front for KC. We've seen Juju Smith-Schuster sign with the Patriots. So he's gone. Mecole Hardman recently just signed with the New York Jets. So unfortunately, as I'm wearing the shirt today, the Legion of Zoom is officially dead. Um, the Super
R.I.P.
Bowl.
Legion
RIP. It
of
was
Zoom.
hell of a run. I mean, for those who don't know, the Super Bowl 54 winning, receiver core Tyreek, Mecole, D-Rob, Sammy Watkins, Byron Pringle. They have all officially left with the departure of Mecole Hardman. So it's a new era for sure in the wide receiver room, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, we got Sky Moore still there, MVS, who's his contract bonus is hit. I think past couple days ago that his contract for this year became guaranteed, so he's going to be here in 2023. Kadarius Toney, who really good when you have him when he's available, so that's the biggest question mark from him, but a lot of rumors and stuff like that as far as the wide receiver market goes. Really, there's two main ones that have been in topics for the Chiefs. Both DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham Jr. I think are those two big signings slash trade candidates that the Chiefs would like to see. Tom, what if anything do you see the Chiefs kind of doing here in the wide receiver market going forward?
Well, you think that they're going to do something, and I
You'd
know
think.
that. Yeah, I don't foresee them going in with just the guys they currently have. I also think that you want to add more than just a rookie. I think you want to add a rookie. You've got to rotate that room out, but um, it makes sense to add a veteran. I don't know. I've been, kind of like scratching my head about are there other guys that we don't know about?
There might be, yeah.
Um, we talking before the show about like I know Rashad Bateman was pretty unhappy in
Hmm.
Baltimore, and depending on how the Lamar Jackson stuff plays out, they could be looking to kind of reset. Um, I DeAndre makes sense. OBJ makes sense, right? And I think somewhat the Chiefs are doing what they, and this is a strength of Brett Veach's, but it's hard as a fan because we just want to
It is
know, like
hard.
we want to have it figured out. It really comes down to, um, being patient and not being leveraged into a deal that's bad for the team, right?
Yeah.
Let's be realistic here. Do the Chiefs have a need at wide receiver? Yes. Is it going to help the Chiefs fill that need if they go out and overspend on, one or two guys who's coming off some injuries and, there's some older guys who are dealing with injuries and you go spend, 15, 16, $17 million a year on one of those guys? Probably not. Because then you spend all that money and let's say they get hurt or they get suspended or whatever, these guys have both missed substantial amounts of games in the last 2 years. You have to be realistic about that. And so there's an investment aspect of it that you don't want to handcuff yourself to that. I totally get that you're like, let's do it. Let's get it done now. Like, let's go, why haven't we offered,
Yeah.
um, but I think that there's also, again, just thinking off the top, like I said, mentioned Rashad Bateman. There's the one guy from the Jets, not the one who just got traded, the other guy that they took.
Corey Davis.
Nope, younger guy, Denzel
Okay.
Mims. Denzel Mims
Oh,
is a guy
okay.
that
Yeah.
people, and again, hasn't done anything, but
Right.
athletically has some potential. It really stinks that the Broncos are in the division because they're shopping apparently wide
Man.
receivers and taking
Yeah.
calls on
There's
those
some
guys.
great wide receivers to shop.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm scrolling through lists
Yeah. Mike
of
Evans was like a
players.
little bit of
Yeah, Mike
a
Evans has
topic for
been
a
thrown
second.
out there. Again, he's an older guy. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
but there's probably a couple other, younger guys that are probably more available than not, but yeah,
yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins and Odell have been the two big ones, and you made some good points about how they're both kind of coming off injuries and both on the bit of the older side. I think DeAndre Hopkins would be a huge signing for the or trade signing for the Chiefs, but I think like you
Hmm.
said, Brett Veach, he's kind of the theme all offseason has been they're drawing a line at what they want to pay for a position, and
Hmm.
they're not gonna overspend, they're not gonna get out leveraged by it. It's just they have a couple different plans in place in case someone doesn't budge as far as
Yeah.
contracts. And we saw Juju and Nicole both leave, obviously, so that kind of indicates to you that they weren't super interested in having them stay because I think both of them had decently affordable contracts. So they must have some sort of plan at wide receiver that obviously involved new faces. So it's just kind of waiting out that process to see if you can get a little more leverage on from the Cardinals, maybe get a cheaper. Because that's the thing. I think financially, it's going to matter a lot for both DeAndre and
Hmm.
Odell, kind of what prices they come in at. As far as you might have some cheaper options out there that the Chiefs might not want to budge on. So
Yeah, well, I think it also just depends on, you know, what. So let's say theoretically, what if the Chiefs miss out on both those guys?
yeah,
Are you really comfortable? I mean, that's I think Kadarius Toney, like you won't find a bigger fan of Kadarius Toney, um, but let's be real about his injury history, right? Um, he's a
significant.
you got a plan on him, limiting his touches and on him missing some games. Sky Moore is great. I think he's going to take a step this next season, but he's also very limited in a lot of ways. MVS, same thing. He has a very specific role, and he stepped up big in the playoffs, and I think there's some chemistry developing there. But, whew, I wonder. So, like, again, who, if it's not going to be DHop or OBJ, who is it, right? What veteran receiver are they going to add? Because it makes too much sense. I think the other part that's hard is like we've seen kind of like counter move with the Chiefs, right? Okay, we're not extending Orlando Brown. First day we go out and get Jawan Taylor.
Right.
Frank Clark is gone, and here's Charles Omenihu. Juan's gone. All right, there's Mike Edwards. But we haven't seen a single move at wide receiver,
Yeah,
which
there's been no
is
counter move for the
yeah. And so some of that's like we don't even have that security, and I don't even know. Like again, you talk about like, I'm looking at right now the list of free agent wide receivers on the market that are still available, and it's not good, guys. It is not
It's
good.
not ideal.
Optimistically, maybe you get a guy like DJ Chark who has
Right.
some physical talent, but injury histories, or you could like piece it together. Maybe you call up old friend Sammy Watkins. Please don't call up old friend Sammy Watkins. Please, 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 just don't do
Oh,
it.
jeez. Yeah.
Um,
I don't
you
know about
know,
that one.
I T.Y. Hilton's out there apparently.
Yeah, I don't know about that one either.
There's maybe you do that and you just hope that um Miles Boykin, there's a younger guy that they could take a swing on, not ever, produced anything. And
Yeah.
I think I'm fairly certain Kyle would yell at me for suggesting that. His best year was under 600 yards. There's not a lot of meat left on the bone, and um, I wonder where you go with that if you don't trade for a guy or get a guy. And
Yeah,
there's
because even looking at like some trade candidates, like on guys who are currently signed to teams, there's not a whole lot of options that would really be realistic
mhm,
to kind of trade for. You really would have to be looking at kind of a younger guy in maybe year two or year
mhm.
three that is just on a team that's new front office, new regime.
Well, and I'll say it here just in case I do still have the luck to manifest Chiefs trades. If you're asking me what call I'm making, and I know you probably had to pay a little bit extra because you're in the division, and he may not be the biggest. Chiefs fans may not love him right now because he's played for the Broncos, but I would be 100% calling the Broncos about Jerry Judy.
Oh yeah,
Um, and
that'd be a prime candidate right there.
I'd give up a handful of picks for him. I'd be
I'd
happy
give
giving
up a
up
pretty penny for him, yeah,
yeah.
because
I
he's
mean, let me ask this: would you give up 31 for Jerry Judy?
probably 31 and get some in return with him.
Try
You
to
know,
well, they don't. You got to understand.
I
So
mean, I guess
that's
you're
the other
trying to pay
part.
the individual in division tax there.
Yeah. Well,
They
and
would even accept that.
The Broncos don't have a ton of draft picks, so I also wonder, could you get away with offering them a second and like some change? A second, a fourth,
Right.
some mid round picks. Next year. Um, so because the wide receiver trade market's pretty cheap too.
Yeah. I say we've
Um,
seen some cheap moves. I mean, Brandon Cooks just went for a fifth and a sixth, I think.
mhm.
Which I mean, he's been traded 7 times now at this point, but still, he's a higher caliber receiver that you're not getting for a huge price tag. So
Yeah. So it's like I said, it's tough to figure out where they're going. It might be a surprise move. It may not. I think they're going to be patient. When you really look at the all of Andy Reid's tenure, he's had two big names at wide receiver: Tyreek Hill and Terrell Owens. And even when he was in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
they didn't go out and spend a lot on wide receivers. They didn't go out and
But I say, yeah, that's been a kind of
um,
a theme in Andy Reid. He hasn't really had big splash wide receiver
and
type
it's
guys.
hard to
He's
play
kind of
wide receiver
it is, yeah.
for
I mean,
them.
it's there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of different roles in Andy's offense that need to be filled with different guys. So he's kind of made it work with lesser pieces and just having quantity over quality. But yeah, it still doesn't. It would still help to have a big signing like DHop or Odell to really be a just a solid number one receiver that you can just kind of entrust to do more things in the offense. Go back to some Tyreek Hill type days where you can leave him on an island with someone and win
Yeah,
those battles.
yeah. So I'm looking at there's a I guess that he also had Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin, right? So it's
Yeah,
not that they've never invested heavily, but it's there's a life cycle there, right?
definitely.
And so it's like I said, it's really interesting to see where they're at right now and how it all will play out down the road. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, and that's otherwise. I mean, the Chiefs. It's a lot of it is business as usual, where he's making sure he's not backing himself into a corner. I really think that something will happen. I would be surprised if it didn't happen before the draft, just
I would be very
because
surprised as well. Yeah,
again
I think
he wants to have
it's inevitable.
that piece. I would say Judy's my first call. I'd really like to go kick the tires on DeAndre Hopkins. Um,
I would really like D-Hop.
Odell, I think, yeah, I think that
Odell is a
there's
shaky one for sure with his injury history, especially. But
yeah, and he just wants. It just sounds like he wants a pretty healthy. This might be his last contract.
yeah,
You
and
know,
yeah, that's the thing too. He already got a ring with the Rams, so you can't even kind of
yeah,
use that leverage. I mean, D-Hop doesn't have a ring, so that's
yeah,
some leverage there. But Odell just might be wanting to get one more big bag before he heads
hmm
off into the sunset. But
yeah. Well, he's getting recruited by Aaron Rodgers and all that. So I'm just like, you know what?
yeah, I mean,
Let's make
hey,
the play for D Hop. I'm down, but um, yeah. I mean, and that's where we're at. Let's wait and see
that is
this
pretty
how
much
wide receiver is going to go.
yeah, and that's kind of the gist of really where the Chiefs are sitting in free agency. I think after wide receiver, there's not too many other crazy moves that need to be made. I mean, maybe add a veteran tackle of some sort, just because you don't have any veteran tackles on the roster right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, other than that, though, it's like yeah, that's kind of the biggest holes that need to be filled. So, kind of transitioning over to the draft because we do want to really start ramping up some draft talk this next month. Obviously, leading up to the big day in Kansas City at the end of April. The Chiefs, still are sitting at number 31. A lot of mocks and pro days and the combine have happened, and a lot more measurements and information is in. And obviously, Tom, you're been studying them like no other. We've been
Mm-hmm.
rocking some great kingdom building content that we're gonna get rolling soon. But obviously, the big question marks is what are the Chiefs gonna do really at pick 31 if they even stay at 31?
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I would lean towards that they would move up somewhere like we saw last draft.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not
Yeah.
a
They've
crazy move up, but
they've got a lot of picks in
a
day
lot
three.
of ammo.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
to
So
to move
they
up there.
may make a small jump. They don't have quite as much. Last year they had that extra third and
Yeah.
some more just from the Tyreek trade. But I think yeah, the kingdom building. It's been. I know we held off on putting some things out. We learned a little bit last year. Like it's hard to project because things change so much as the season goes, and it's one of the things. I listen to a lot of draft content, and one of the things that Daniel Jeremiah talks about is like learning to, especially as like an analyst, like you scout just as much with your ears as you do with your eyes. Sometimes when you're trying to figure out, because the NFL sees guys differently than how we see people.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong on that. But um, yeah, I think that the hardest part is going to be being patient at 31. And that's where I go. The wider. So here's the thing about the wide receiver class this year, and we were talking about this pre-show. It's not great. It's not. It's not last year where you had like three guys who could be your primary pass catcher. You have Quentin Johnson, who's 6'1", and then a bunch of people who aren't 6'1", like
Yeah,
a bunch of them.
a little bit less.
So I mean, we can just go through the list real quick. Let's Jordan Addison is a big name
Big
that
name.
people probably know.
He won some good wide receiver awards in college. I forget is it the Jim Thorpe
The
is the wide receiver award?
Yeah, and the Bolitnikov,
Blitnikoff,
I
that's the
think.
big one
Yeah.
that he won. Yeah.
So he measured in at 5'11", 173.
Very, very
Jackson
light.
Smith and Jigba, probably probably my wide receiver one. And like, this isn't hate
Probably,
on
but
Smith and Jigba, because I think he people for again, it's that recency bias, but it's working against him, where like he was banged up this last year. The year before, like on that Ohio State team, he was one of the better players. But he's 6', 196, so he's got solid size, but he really is probably a guy that you're playing on the inside more than the out. Then you have Zay Flowers, who's 5'9", 182. Tank Dell, one of my personal favorites to talk about, because he gets a lot of love for being 5'8" and 165. There are junior high kids out there who are built bigger, and I mean that. Like I say that, tongue in cheek, jokingly, whatever. But you see that on tape. You see that, and it's hard to get hands on him. But he also played at a college level and didn't have a lot of like elite press corners. I think he's going to struggle at the NFL. Josh Downs, very similar, 5'9", 171. I like him just as much. I like Zay Flowers almost, and they're just, again, the size is a problem. Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee, everybody, probably the hot name, 6 foot, 176, 1 year wonder. Supposed to be a burner, but he ran a 4.4. So it's like, you just, all right, what do you got for me? You got two other guys who are over 6 foot, and this is your I'm just going on PFF's like top 10 right here. Michael Wilson, 6'2", out of Stanford, 213, ran a 4.58, so not bad, but he had some pretty big medical stuff. And then maybe a guy that you take on day two that you could develop is Rashee Rice at a SMU. SMU, yeah, 6'1", 204. I do like Rashee Rice. He's got some work to do as a route runner, he just kind of has one speed through his routes. I think he makes some really cool highlight catches, but he struggled with like concentration drops. He kind of cleaned it up his last year, but he's a guy that I wrote up earlier, and I need to go back and probably update him a little bit now that the season's over. He's a guy that like day two would be a good investment if you have a veteran, because he's not a guy I think you bring in day one and play.
Is he any more or less raw than Mecole was when he was drafted?
They're definitely different styles of players.
Okay. So he got one go speed. So I don't know. Sounds like Mecole.
Yeah, no. He's not. He's definitely not like the burner like Mecole. He's not the shifty guy that is going to make people miss or even outrun somebody to the corner like Mecole can do, which I think is important for him. Like that was his signature thing. That's the other thing about this group is, like I said, it's like a lot of these guys are very similar. There's a lot of overlap in what they can do. Very few of them, if any, have a trait that I would really go, oh, that's elite, right? That's a top tier trait that you can draft a guy and build around it. We talk about Jalen Hyatt's speed, but I think I guess I shouldn't put it all on the time speed, because I think when you watch the tape against Alabama, like, okay, you could say he's got an elite like trait as his speed. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is as clean of a route runner as you're going to get, but he's again limited a little bit to the inside. And then we were talking before the show about Quentin Johnston at a TCU, who I started pretty high on, and then I feel like he got pretty overhyped. There's a lot of like top 10, top 15 wide receiver one. Um, and I was like, maybe not that much, guys. It's a little rich. I think I've got him as a top 25 guy. Is probably where he's going to land. He might just end up being a top 40, but like I said, he's got more size. He's got some interesting traits to him.
He's got size, but
He's
Big
big,
12
but
receivers definitely
yeah, he's big, but he
definitely
also
scare me.
moves differently. So, and Scout's upset by this conversation. He doesn't like Quentin Johnson, so
I agree, Scout.
not gonna get Scout's approval on Quentin Johnson.
Hey, well,
So,
we know there's one guy that Scout has tremendous approval of, and we'll talk about it in a second here. But yeah, wide receiver class this year definitely not. You're definitely betting a lot on development, right? That's kind of the big thing is you're hoping that your staff can develop them. And historically, it's not easy to play wide receiver in Andy Reid's offense. Plus, there's been a little bit of a turnover at the wide receiver coach. I believe we've got a new wide receiver coach. We had Greg Lewis depart, so definitely interesting to see. We'll probably, I mean, it would be a typical Chiefs fashion to draft a guy on day two, a la McCole, a la Sky, and just have a guy you can kind of develop there. Um, so the other big position I think at this point that would make sense for round one um, would be defensive end, right? I think and the defensive end class this year significantly better than what the wide receiver class is. There's definitely some guys that have some good Steve Spagnuolo traits. There's also some guys that don't have those traits that are still some really good pass rushers. What are you seeing as far as the edge class this year, Tom?
yeah, definitely a deeper class than, especially compared to like last year. And we just dropped right before the show. I dropped the first completed graphic, which was the BJ Ojulari out of LSU, who of all the defensive ends I'm going to talk about is probably the one in terms of like size that doesn't fit the most.
Mm-hmm.
And but his skill set as a pass rusher is pretty developed. And I think like you talk about his size, but you look at his frame. The kid's also only 20 years old. There's a good chance that he could grow more and put on
Jeez.
some weight. And
Yeah.
what I appreciate is that he's 20 years old and he got to wear number 18 at LSU. And if you're not familiar, there's a tradition. LSU is number 18 at LSU is a jersey that the team decides before the season like who gets to play, who gets to wear it. And it's kind of like being a team captain, but I think a little bit more of a prestigious thing for them, because it's voted on by your peers, right? And with that, they picked him, because he embodies success on and off the field, and young dude, and has room to grow, and I think that's the exciting part. Everybody's talking about Nolan Smith, who, like, Nolan Smith is benefiting from Hassan Reddick's success, and that's who I kind of compare him to. He's undersized. He's not a developed pass rusher. He is. I like Nolan Smith. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all this just to dump on him, but I think his combine performance, he tested really well, and now he's kind of blowing up. One of the important things, and I heard this, I think, when we're talking about actually maybe it was Keon White, another Daniel Jeremiah little tidbit, which is don't count it twice, which is hard to do at the combine time because we get there and we're all excited about, this, about this athletic performance that's crazy and everything is, awesome. And so Nolan Smith is flying up the boards right now. Tyree Wilson was a guy I liked early. He's probably going in the top 10, top 5. There's another guy, Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama, who's been a consensus top 5 guy for about a year now.
Oh yeah.
Two names I'd watch. Just I don't know if they'd be there at 31, but we talked about like making a small move up. I think
They'll trade up range, yeah.
yeah, if one of these two guys falls a little bit, the Chiefs might take a swing. I'd like them to, because this is kind of the bottom of that top tier. Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, who's a bit of a projection right now, but you watch him play and you see some really high level traits. You see some high level strength things, and there's some room to grow, and just like it just look again a younger player who could get some more experience, but he's a bit of a hot name right now as well. But he fits. He's very similar to George Karlaftis, but I would say he's probably a little bit twitchier, a little more fluid in his movements. I think he's got more bend in his ankles and his hips, and can flatten the edge a little bit better. The other guy that I think is really interesting that I think Steve Spagnuolo would like kick some doors down to get a move up for, it's kind of it's this combination where he's kind of sliding at the right time, and that's Miles Murphy out of Clemson. And Miles Murphy was highly recruited, was a 5-star athlete, um, and has been at Clemson and was really projected taking an upset. And his flashes of play, like when he really puts it together, high level, looks like a top 5 pick. But he was asked to do a lot of different things at Clemson and kind of put in some different positions. He's a bigger guy at 6'5". I think he weighed in at 274. And the dude, like, again, the flashes are there. And I think if you just if you kind of simplify his role as he's growing and just say, hey, actually, I just looked him up, 268. So still a big dude. Get him to really focus on, developing as a pass rusher, just kind of playing. He just kind of does everything. Like right now, he does everything pretty well. He doesn't have necessarily an ace up his sleeve, and so you'd want him to kind of develop some of that. One of the things I think his arms aren't super short, but they're a little shorter than you want, 33 3/4, so about 34-inch arms. You compare that to some of the other guys. So like I use that as an example. So BJ Ojulari, who's 2 inches shorter, has 34 1/4-inch arms. Actually he's listed at 3 inches shorter. So that's an issue with Murphy, but I think if you got him, he just looks like one of those guys who's going to play in the NFL for 10 years and average, somewhere between 7 and 10 sacks, and you just you plug him in and you just let him be there for a while. So there's definitely there's some more guys that we could get into. Keon White, and I've talked about him before. Gosh, the list goes on. It's a much deeper class at defensive end than it was last year, and so again, I think I love Charles Omenihu, so that pickup could do, but like you got to just have a strong rotation there. So whatever, if they decide to go that direction, there's plenty of options for them.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. Definitely seems to be the more profitable route. A lot of these guys seem like they're a lot more day one ready to contribute, and obviously we're going to have a role to fill with Frank Clark's absence and just the overall need for pass rush juice. But, like you said, Charles Omenihu signing gives the Chiefs some options, some wiggle room as far as not having to reach on some guys and kind of letting the board fall to them and, potentially move up to the early mid-20s and snag a guy like Miles Murphy or like if BJ Ojulari fell or something like that, that'd be pretty ideal. I know Miles Murphy hits the measurables. The one thing I got a question about, last Clemson pass rusher that comes to mind from me when I think about first round picks would be a guy that the Raiders reached on very hard in Clelin Ferrell. Any similarities at all in those two guys, and also just more of a broad question, I guess, of what was wrong with Clelin Ferrell that didn't end up transitioning to the NFL that you see in some of these potential first round pass rushers?
Yeah, I mean, I was a fan of Clelin Ferrell, and I think that it's we talk about like scouting the helmet and definitely went early. I think some of it was the situation that he was drafted into.
Tough situation for sure.
Yeah, I see again, and that's where like. And I'll draw a similarity. Cleveland, I think, was a guy that you wanted to draft and let him develop his first 2 years or whatever. And instead, he's the 4th overall pick, so it's big expectation. You got to start. Yeah. Same thing. I think that it's a rotation guy, and then probably year 3 or 4, that's where they get to really put it together. Clemson moves the guys around. They play. They condense down a lot. It's like. I know Miles Murphy played some like 4-eye, some inside like over the guard stuff versus being over a tackle and going around the edge, which I think he can do, but I don't think he again just was asked to do a lot of things, and so he's kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. I can't. I don't. I mean, obviously we follow the Raiders somewhat, but I don't know specifically about how Clelin Ferrell was always deployed or what his practice habits or anything like that were. I just think that the big difference for me is I think Miles Murphy being a little bit later is going to be put in a being taken a little bit later is going to be in a position where the team can be a little more patient with him. Um, and I think that there's more athleticism there on the side of um, Miles Murphy. Which is hard because again, Cleveland was a good athlete coming out. I was high on Cleveland Farrell. I would have
Yeah.
I would have taken him in the first round, but it's very similarly ranked in terms of like how I saw them. I think a lot of it had to do with those expectations, and then this game is mental, and your
Oh yeah.
reputation sometimes will determine your opportunities, especially after you've kind of come down. So um, yeah, Cleveland was I thought, a little slimmer. Probably had a little bit more bend to him, but not as much power. Miles is more willing to, I think, put his nose in the dirt and play with some power and some strength. So I get, excuse me again, that's of course music to Steve Spagnuolo's ears, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think those are the big ones, and I think that just being in a different position. I think Miles Murphy is a top five guy. You're putting a lot of expectations on him that I don't know if he'll live up to. Going to be a little bit patient with him, but I think the upside is pretty big there.
Yeah, because I remember Cleveland Farrell was mocked to go to the Chiefs at like the end of the first round, and then he ends up going 4, which is crazy. Kind of reminds me almost of like a George Karlaftis situation when you're explaining that how you draft him at the end of the first round, you let him develop for a couple years before you really rely on him, and yeah, the Raiders kind of did the opposite of that. So yeah, definitely some good options I think going into day one. Before we get out of here, I know there's some tackles obviously that are you did some write ups on them, or might be a decent option, but not an immediate option. What else in your mind do you think, as far as round one, is a decent any more decent options for the Chiefs? Is best pick available a thing that you think they would kind of consider if
Oh,
there's a real
absolutely.
stud athlete at another position that kind of falls for them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot of options. So yeah, tackle is obviously one that could happen. One of the things that I would watch is there's some tight ends in this class that
Mm,
this class is really loaded at tight end, and it's kind of like pick your favorite flavor of ice cream here. There's some really athletic guys. There's Darnell Washington, who's just like this giant guy who's a great blocker. There is, one guy that would be interesting, and I don't know if he'll fall to 31, but Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, either one of those guys, are pass catching threats. You talk about like, okay, well, if you can't get a wide receiver, why not go get another tight end? And then you just, you move your offense around and you
so the
have
Chiefs love them tight ends.
has
They
yeah
will they
have
will use them.
have that going on. Um, uh, yeah, tackle's a big one. I think there's some other positions that wouldn't surprise me too much. Safety.
Yeah,
I
but
think
say
if you
safety would
wanted
be a good
to,
surprise one maybe.
yeah. So if a guy like Brian Branch fell, a really talented player, he's probably maybe the only first round safety I would have. And I know right now I know in Daniel Jeremiah's latest stuff. I've mentioned him 3 times, by the way. Uh,
Hey,
he's
he's the
Brian
draft
Branch.
king. So
Yeah, Brian Branch wasn't in that. Um, Interior defensive line, defensive tackle.
yeah,
Uh,
that's a good
I haven't
route.
had a chance to dig on him too much, but it might be an interesting one, especially because we haven't gotten the other piece of news this offseason that we wanted, which was the Chris Jones extension.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Kalijah Cansey out of Pittsburgh, who was a late riser, undersized defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh.
We've heard
Really,
that before.
yep, really skilled pass rusher. Like the dude
We've heard that
is,
before too.
yeah, really just gets after it, and um, like Turk Wharton turned up to 1,000. That's what you
Yeah.
got to think there. So that wouldn't be a huge shock. Brian Brzee, a defensive tackle out of Clemson, his situation is different. He was a guy who really was considered a top prospect for a long time, um, and had a lot of hype even into late to the season. one of the challenges, and so if you're not familiar with, you don't follow college football, right before the 2022 season, his 15-year-old sister passed away from cancer, and so that obviously, that's impossibly difficult and impossible tragedy to navigate, and I think that it's fair to say that that affected um, his year, like it would affect, I think, anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and so it's hard to kind of evaluate that, but there's definitely some, again, the flashes of the play there are tremendous, but then he just, yeah, sometimes he really struggled this past year. I think you got to get him in the room and look at him and kind of figure out, um, what all that's, kind of what's going on, what was affected, and he's got an athletic profile that could really um, be a good addition to the Chiefs rotation. There's some running backs, but we're not going to take a running back
No,
in
no,
the
no,
first
no,
round.
no.
Looks,
Can't do that
yeah,
anymore.
Scout is already barking at me for suggesting
I
that.
mean, unless Bijan
Um,
Robinson really fell, right? I mean,
yeah,
you know.
a name that keeps getting floated around is an edge player, but um, Will McDonald, I'm not it, fam. Just not it for
Yeah.
me. But the other thing is, like, I go through that list and there's not a lot of huge needs, and so they might. I mean, again, they might just go
Yeah.
best player available. Maybe
Definitely get the
that's
best person. I
um,
mean, not many people had us taking a corner round one last year, right? That was kind of something
yeah,
that we didn't
yeah.
entirely think about, but got
So,
a really strong athlete in Trent McDuffie and made
oh
the
yeah,
most of it. So,
yeah. Trent's been huge. So Scout is here to give his input. He thinks we should get a running back. So
jeez, come on, Scout. Let's just stick to BJ Ojulari. All right, come on now.
yeah,
But yeah,
so
definitely the Chiefs have a lot of solid options, and the way Brett Beach has operated this off season lets them, yeah, just gives them a lot of wiggle room and gives them a lot of it frees them up a lot to really build out this roster. So we will obviously have much more draft content, draft talk as we get closer these next couple weeks as we kind of see what other moves the Chiefs make and all the things like that. So be sure to follow us at Kingdom Says Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Go over to Arrowhead Tom's Twitter at Arrowhead Tom and follow along for all those kingdom building prospects that you'll be seeing these next couple weeks. It's going to be a good time. If you're listening, of course, you can watch us on YouTube at Kingdom Says Pod or on Spotify, Apple Music, anything like that. You can go ahead and tune in and listen to us. We do appreciate you guys for tuning in and listening to this one today. And yeah, draft is coming soon. It's going to be a good time. And we've got a lot more coming for you. So thank you all for watching and listening once again. And we will see you guys in the next one.